right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling large language models, those AI systems you hear so much about, powering chatbots and all those smarty pants assistants we love to use.
Oh, yeah, they're everywhere these days.
You really are. But we're looking at a paper called DeepRAG Thinking to Retrieval Step by Step for Large Language Models. And, well, it's all about making these LLMs, as they're called, not just sound smart, but actually, think before they talk, so to speak. Make sure they're not just spitting out random stuff.
Yeah, that's a real issue, isn't it? I mean, we've all seen it. The AI confidently tells you something that's just flat out wrong. Researchers call that hallucination.
Hallucination? That's kind of a spooky way to put it.
It is, right. But it basically means the AI is limited by, well, what it's learned from its training data.
Ah, so it's like if you only skimmed a few headlines and then tried to write a whole report, you might sound confident, but the facts just wouldn't be there.
Exactly. You've got it. And that's where this idea of retrieval augmented generation comes in. RAG for short.
RAG, okay.
Instead of just relying on what it already knows, RAG lets those LLMs tap into outside sources, like think databases, the internet, you name it, to double-check what it's thinking.
So it's like giving the AI a fact checker, like a built-in BS detector.
Uh-huh, kind of.
Yeah.
In real time, yeah. But this DeepRAG thing we're looking at today, well, that takes it even further.
Oh, how so?
It makes the whole retrieval process a lot more strategic, you see. It doesn't just go on a wild goose chase for every little thing. It's more like how we humans solve problems.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying this DeepRAG actually thinks about what it already knows and then decides if it needs to look for more information?
You got it. It's more deliberate, more structured than the usual RAG methods out there. One of the really cool things here is this idea of a retrieval narrative. Like, imagine breaking a big, complicated problem down into smaller, connected questions.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Well, DeepRAG does something similar, creating this chain of questions that guides how it looks for information.
So it's not just throwing random keywords into a search engine and hoping for the best.
Precisely. It's more like planning out a research strategy.
Yeah.
And by being so specific, so targeted in its search, DeepRAG gets around one of the biggest problems with LLMs right now. A lot of times they make these really vague or just plain irrelevant searches, and that means you get inefficient, sometimes even inaccurate results.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. But wouldn't all this thinking and planning, wouldn't that slow things down?
That's a good question, but not necessarily. You see, DeepRAG has this thing called atomic decisions.
Atomic decisions, what are those?
So at each step in that retrieval narrative, the system has to make a clear choice. Do I have enough info already, or do I need to go look for more? It's a yes or no thing.
A yes or no, huh?
Yep. And this way, it cuts down on all those unnecessary searches, saves time and computing power, those resources.
Okay, so it's more accurate and more efficient. That's impressive. But how do they actually teach DeepRAG to do all this? I mean, how do you train an AI to think like that?
Well, they've got a two-stage process. First, DeepRAG learns to, well, basically imitate really effective reasoning processes. So it figures out which steps usually need outside information. And then it goes through something called a chain of calibration.
Chain of calibration sounds intense.
It does say. But think of it like this. Imagine you're learning a new skill, like playing an instrument. At first, you depend a lot on your teacher for feedback, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But the more you practice, the better you get at spotting your own mistakes and correcting them yourself.
I see where you're going with this.
It's like that for DeepRAG. It gets fine-tuned to recognize when it doesn't know something and make smarter decisions about when it needs to search for more info.
So DeepRAG is basically learning what it doesn't know. That's pretty meta. And pretty important, I'd say, for any researcher, whether it's a human or an AI.
Exactly. And this fancy training they do, it leads to some amazing results.
Oh, like what?
Well, in their tests, they found DeepRAG not only beat other RAG-check techniques in terms of, getting the right answers,
Yeah.
but it also needed way fewer searches to get there.
Give us some numbers. How much more efficient are we talking?
Let's see. In one of their experiments, DeepRAG used 30% fewer searches compared to a regular RAG model. And still, it got more answers right. So that's a big jump in both efficiency and how trustworthy it is, right?
30%. Wow, that is significant. But can you give us a real-world example from the paper, something our listeners can picture?
Sure, yeah. In Figure 7, they compared DeepRAG with another RAG technique. The question they used was, what is the birthplace of the director of the film Peter's Friends?
Peter's Friends, okay.
And this is what researchers call a multi-hop reasoning problem. Because you've got to first figure out who directed the movie, and then find where they were born.
Gotcha. So it's not just a simple lookup. There are steps involved. And that's where DeepRAG should really shine with its strategic approach. So what happened?
Well, DeepRAG went at it, systematically. First, it asked itself who directed Peter's friends, and it found the answer, Kenneth Branagh, internally. No need to search. Then, next logical step, where was Kenneth Branagh born? And boom, again, finds the answer, Belfast, Northern Ireland, all without having to do any outside searches.
So DeepRAG used what it already knew and solved the problem in 2 quick steps. Pretty slick. What about the other RAG technique? How did it
Well,
do?
that's where it gets interesting. The other one, it didn't have that strategic step-by-step way of thinking. So it ended up kind of getting lost in a bunch of pointless searches, couldn't use what it already knew effectively, and in the end got the wrong answer.
Oof, that's not good.
Yeah, not so good. It's like DeepRAG is playing chess while the other one's playing checkers, thinking several moves ahead. The other one's just reacting.
Great analogy. And it's that strategic thinking that makes DeepRAG so exciting, so promising for the future of AI. I'm starting to see how powerful this whole thinking to retrieval idea could be. We've seen it make LLMs better at answering questions, but I can't help but wonder, what else could we use this for? Does it have to be just about questions and answers?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely dive into more in a bit. But first, I think it's important to look at the potential impact of this technology, both the good and uh, let's just say there are always trade-offs when you start messing with the cutting edge of AI.
Okay, so DeepRAG is changing the game, making LLMs more trustworthy and efficient with this thinking to retrieval thing. But where else could we use this beyond just, answering questions?
Well, imagine AI that could write a whole research paper, like a really good one, pulling in all the right sources, building a solid argument, and, no fact-checking errors, which even humans mess up sometimes.
That would be amazing.
Right. Or think about like a travel planning app. It knows your budget, what you're into, how much time you have, and then it suggests the best flights, places to stay, all based on up-to-the-minute info. Pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, those are some seriously cool examples. It's like DeepRAG could change how we do research, planning, even decision-making in tons of areas.
Exactly, and that's what makes this tech so exciting. But we got to remember, DeepRAG is still, well, it's kind of a baby.
Yeah.
Early stages. The research we're talking about, it focuses on question answering. So there's still work to do before we see it everywhere doing all sorts of things.
Right, so no AI travel agents or robot researchers just yet. What kind of challenges are they facing trying to make DeepRAG do more?
One thing is, the way DeepRAG decides whether to search or not, it's pretty simple now. It's like yes or no, search or don't search. But in the real world, deciding to look for more info, it's way more complicated than that. Think about like researching something where experts disagree or things change really fast. A simple yes or no, it's not enough, is it?
No, I guess not. We humans are usually pretty good at figuring out if the source is reliable or if there are different sides to a story. That's got to be tough to teach an AI.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the whole efficiency thing. Searching those databases, the internet, that takes a lot of computing power. DeepRAG is good at not doing extra searches, but as the tasks get more complex, it's going to need more and more power, more resources.
So it's a balancing act, getting the right answers, but not, using up all the energy in the world doing it.
Yeah, for sure. But even with those limits, DeepRAG is a huge step forward.
Hmm.
We're talking about AI that doesn't just process info, but it reasons about it, kind of how we humans do.
It's like we're seeing a whole new kind of AI being born, one that's less of a tool and more of a partner, helping us learn and understand things.
I like that, a partner. But we got to remember, with any powerful new tech, there's always the potential for, well, unintended consequences. And that brings us to another big question.
Unintended consequences, huh? Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of downsides are we talking about with this whole thinking to retrieval thing? What should we be watching out for?
Well, as these AI systems get, smarter, better at finding and using information, we have to think about things like bias and misinformation. Could they make those problems worse?
That's a good point. The internet, let's face it, it's a bit of a wild west out there. So much good stuff, but also a ton of junk, biased stuff, things that are just plain wrong. How do we make sure an AI like DeepRAG doesn't, accidentally spread bad information?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Researchers are definitely working on it. One idea is to be really careful about what sources DeepRAG can use, like building a special library just for it, one that's full of reliable, accurate info.
So instead of letting it loose on the whole internet, we're kind of curating its reading list.
Exactly.
a more controlled environment. That way, we can be more sure about the information it's using, to make its decisions and stuff.
That makes sense. But what about when there's, like, real debate? Experts disagreeing on something. How do we teach an AI to handle that, to give a balanced view?
Another great question. One thing they're looking at is training these AIs to like recognize different opinions. So instead of just giving one answer, it could show you the different sides of an argument, highlight where people agree and disagree.
So instead of being the judge, it's more like a guide helping people have a better discussion.
Yeah, that's the idea. Give people the tools to understand those tricky topics.
This is all so cool, but I gotta say, it's also a little, well, intimidating. It's like we're right on the edge of a huge change in how we use tech and information.
You're not wrong about that. We're in uncharted waters here.
It's
It's exciting, yeah, but we got to be careful too. We need to talk about the good and the bad, get ethicists involved, policymakers, regular people, everyone. Absolutely. It's a responsibility we all share. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into DeepRAG, I gotta encourage everyone listening to go check out the full paper. It's really fascinating stuff. And it's clear we're just getting started with AI. I don't know about you, but I'm super excited to see where this all leads.
me too. It's a wild time to be in this field. And I bet we'll be deep diving into a lot more cool AI stuff in the future.
For sure. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. And as always, keep those minds curious